Well, let's kick off. I'm sure there'll be more people popping in over the next few minutes as we go through introductions. So anyway, welcome to this webinar. I'm Simon Elias, Director of the Lean Competence System, which is organising this today. The purpose of which, as it says, they introduce the 6th edition of the Lean Toolbox by John Bicheno and Matthias Holweg, and explore some of its themes and messages. We're gaining insights into key lean topics and issues that it helps reveal. I think it's been going for such a long time now. It's covered quite a bit of the evolution of lean, and there's some interesting, I think, aspects we can draw from the current edition compared with some of the older editions. So, we've allowed 90 minutes for this. We may not get there, but we've done a few of these before. It's amazing how the time does get used up, especially as we've got the polls. We are recording this event, which we'll publish later on a web page for everyone to have a look at. Meanwhile, keep yourself on mute unless we open it up to questions. General introduction. Our guests today are John and Matthias. John, obviously many of you are going to know John through all these other books, and as part of his alumni of the various MSc programs he's worked on over the past 25 years or so. The first of which was as director of the first one at the Lean Enterprise Research Centre at Cardiff University, where he and I worked on that for several years. Then he moved to Buckingham and created the Buckingham Lean Enterprise Unit and created another MSc there. So a lot of alumni, I'm sure, will be here today and have been benefited from John's words of wisdom over the past few decades. Matthias was also at the Lean Enterprise Research Centre some 25 years ago. So it's good to be working together with John and Matthias. At that time, we were heavily involved in something called the 3-day CART program, which I was also part of the project team. We had a great time doing that project. But since then, Matthias has spent some time at MIT in Boston and at Cambridge University, and now is American Standard Companies Professor of Operations Management at the Side Business School at Oxford University. He's always been pretty active in the research field, especially in the automotive sector. And his recent work is on the areas of digital tools, AI, and additive manufacturing. So a great welcome to John and Matthias, who will be obviously spending time discussing the 6th edition. We've got, once after this short introduction, Matthias and John spend a short time just discussing the 6th edition and drawing up some of the key themes and topics that it covers. And then we're going to spend the most of our time running some polls, which are questions that emerge from the book and the key themes and topics within it. And the idea is that we will be asking you some questions, you'll be responding, and then John and Matthias will spend some time commenting on those results, and hopefully we'll get some interesting insights from those results, which we found, we've done these things before, quite interesting and illuminating. So that's one of the main learning outputs from these sorts of sessions. And I'll discuss a bit more about the operation of the polls when after we've done the review of the book and how it works. But hopefully most of you have probably used Mentimeter before, and it's a pretty simple system to use and we found quite effective. We have got, if we do have time at the end, we can open up some broader questions and answers. We'll see how we get, but these things tend to move along, and we tend to run out of time rather than have time left. And of course, you will have the chance to win one of 10 Lean Toolbox special offer for this or special promotion for this event. So essentially, the easy thing to do, if you state your wish to be entered into the draw in the Zoom chat, that just say, book draw, please, or something with your name and email, and then we'll put them in a hat next week, and we'll draw them out, and the lucky winners we'll put on the web page. Some incentive to there. Okay, that's all I wanted to cover in terms of the introduction. So we can go straight into the first sort of part of the session, which is the review of the and discussion of the actual 6th edition. So I'll hand over to, I'm not sure who's going to start, to John and Matthias, who will take you through this. I'll control the slides, probably easiest to do that. So just tell me when you want me to click on. John Matthias, so over to you.
Well, okay, I'll kick off. Of course, it's been 6 years since the 5th edition came out. So, well, a lot has happened in the last 6 years, although perhaps of course, the underlying TPS, Toyota Production System, has been relatively stable. But on the other hand, there's been quite an explosion of a whole lot of areas that were around in the past, but really taken off in the last number of years. So we could mention things like digital, which you'll be saying a little bit about. Obviously, people enterprise, people emphasis. More and more of that has taken place. A big one, of course, climate change and sustainability, and also agile. So, of course, as we say, all these areas have been around for some time, but have taken off very significantly. You know, they've been taken off sort of exponentially. So, you know, I think a lot of people most humans are used to a sort of a linear progression, and with a lot of these developments are sort of exponential, and that can catch a lot of people with their pants down, so to speak. So anyway, should just say that the Lean Toolbox has updated many previous sections, but on the people side, of course, that is such a vast area. So last year, Noel Hennessy, which I think some of you know Noel from the Cardiff MSc, Noel Hennessy and I wrote a book called Human Lean, which is sort of a companion to this book. So of course we can't put all this. Wouldn't have a hope of putting on all the material on the people side in the 6th edition, but although there is material on which we consider to be fairly important in this book. Okay, so yeah, okay, I don't know. Okay, we could you can see the previous editions here. Okay, so some of these updates that have been more significant of course there's a lot that have been included, but just picked out a few that we want to say a few words about. So so maybe Matthias can say something about the framework that we've adopted for this 6th edition.
Sure. Hi everyone, good to see you. Quite a few names I do remember from the various MSc Lean modules we did back in the day. And yes, Simon, it has been a while ago, but great to see everyone. If you want to go to the next slide, please, Simon. So one of the issues I've had with the various previous editions of the Lean Toolbox has been one of structure and one of how do we really guide people through their lean journey, and how prescriptive should we be in terms of implementation frameworks. So as you may remember, the previous one, we had sort of a prior section where we talked about implementation frameworks, but quite frankly, I was never really happy with that. This time around, we think we've found a better solution, one that tries to, first of all, come up with a sort of generic chapter on philosophy, mindset, and sort of science, where we talk about the links to Kingman and other sort of more quantitative operations models, to say, that's something everyone should know. You should know about the value, the waste, what is value. You should know about sort of the scientific models that are helpful. But then really is a question of which tools you need along the journey. So we've tried to organize it along sort of the improvement journey from organization or organizing for flow, preparing, creating, and improving, along which you may well want to use various tools that are either required all the way throughout, or may come in and help you at given points, which are product design. Very important, of course, all the way through are the HR ones, and John mentioned the Human Lean book that can give you more. And the one bit that I think we all are seeing more and more of and become ever more important are digital tools like AI or even 3D printing, Internet of Things, that actually can be quite helpful. So we're hoping that this structure of the book works better than what I think we did in the past. So we're quite curious to see what you may think. Great. Simon, if you want to click to the next slide, I think, John, you want to give a few updates on the other topics, demand and Seru?
Yeah. Okay. Well, demand analysis and scheduling, I've always thought is sort of at the heart of Lean. And many of you guys who've been associated with Cardiff will know about a lot of emphasis that we used to put on demand analysis and scheduling and so on. So we've tried to extend that in this current edition by incorporating some of the older ideas like runners, repeaters, and strangers sort of thing, but also what sometimes known as the Glenday sieve and so on, but also using some of the, many of you would know about John Darlington's analysis, what he calls FRED, if you like. So talking about the demand patterns like normal demand, seasonal demand, lumpy demand, and so on. So we've got a section here where we try to integrate these two ideas, this idea of, if you like, runners, repeaters, and strangers with the, if you like, demand pattern, and look at appropriate scheduling tools. Of course, this is mainly manufacturing, I think, but not necessarily so. I think there's a lot of service operations that are where this would be applicable. So anyway, that's one of the areas. Another area that I've been quite intrigued about, that has also been around for a long, long time, but has really surfaced in more recent sort of academic journals, this idea of Seru. So Seru production or Seru cells have come about probably starting with Canon and Sony in Japan. At least that's, I don't know whether that's the guys who started it, but anyway, I think this sort of fits in quite well with the sort of agile framework, if you like, because Seru cells emphasize flexibility and adaptability rather than efficiency. So, classic Toyota cells or lean cells are very much really along waste reduction and efficiency, but Seru cells are interesting because they're more in line with adaptability and flexibility. So we included a little bit about Seru cells because I think actually it's quite interesting that a lot of at least manufacturing, but also service facilities have got quite a bit of flexible capacity available where they can capitalize on this sort of idea. So anyway, I think that's quite an interesting concept, getting away from the highly efficient type of sort of Toyota cells, if you like, or traditional lean cells. So yeah, kind of something that I've been interested in.
Great.
Okay, then, Matthias will tell you about digital.
Sure. I think it's a topic we can't ignore, right? And the term Lean 4.0 or Lean Industry 4.0, you will all have come across. And the general question, of course, is in a digital world where we have access to a lot more data, we have the ability to do predictive analytics, almost on your local desktop or in the cloud, and essentially the AWS and or Microsoft Azure, machine learning services are freely available, well, not freely, but certainly widely available. What does that mean for Lean per se? And we had a lot of debate on this. Essentially, our view is that these tools are putting some fundamental questions out there as to how we should go about it, but they don't, in our view, threaten the fundamental, true north of Lean. In other words, these digital tools are a great addition to our toolbox, but they don't threaten the fundamental aspects of process improvement, but they can greatly support it. And maybe let me give 2 quick examples just to illustrate this. If you think about standard quality management, let's say you want to assess the capability of a process, and you would sample. Why? Because for one, you aren't able to assess all products on the line. That's too labor intensive. And equally, the process of, let's say, creating an SPC chart has been quite manual. In other words, you have to restrict how much labor and time you invest in assessing the capability and control of a given process. Now, with AI systems that can employ convolutional neural networks that basically can look at every single part that comes down the line and are able to measure and assess it and give you not just the view of how a sample of the process fares in terms of quality, but how, in fact, how all products that come down the line fare in terms of quality, mean that a lot of the practices that we're doing are no longer required, right? We don't need to sample, we don't need to restrict, because we have now access to a lot more data. Same, of course, if you think about moving from preventive to predictive maintenance, right? You don't need to sample anymore. You can now fly a drone along sort of your production equipment and actually from the office look at potential exceptions that the drone footage and the AI puts forward as, well, something may be going wrong here. It fundamentally changes the economics of process improvement and many of the tasks we do. But ultimately, in our view, it doesn't threaten the lean logic per se. But it's not all good news. We also think there are dangers inherent in all this. And it's good to remember that Toyota, of course, inherently was skeptical of technology, and for a good reason. So if you think about, so Toyota's view was that technology is good if it can support it, but you should never, deploy technology that could prevent a barrier between the people and the process. And we see exactly this, of course, now happening with digital technologies. Think about, for example, VR, AR headsets that become very prescriptive in how people should conduct, let's say, their collection process in a warehouse, let's say. And the more you do this, the more you are prescriptive to the glasses. Go here, pick this up, check this, do that, do this. Of course, you're more removing people from the process, and the higher barriers you create in terms of their engagement or meaningful engagement in Kaizen. So, we should be aware of what the technology can do. We should also be mindful of how that shifts the balance or the levels of engagement. And I think it's always useful in this sense to, look at this old famous trilogy of people, process, and technology. And it's not just about technology in the process. You must be mindful of what it does to the people in that. So in that sense, there is a new entire section in the book on digital technologies. We think they're very powerful. We think that all of us will be seeing more of them in future, but we do see them as new tools in our toolbox. We don't see them fundamentally changing what Lean is and what the fundamental aspects of Lean are, or that make Lean work. One, of course, is engagement and empowerment on the people side. So we hope we found a good balance in the book, and we're curious to see what you think. Now, John, do you want to say a few words about process mining, which of course very much links to this?
Yeah, well, so digital mapping and process mining follows directly on from what Matthias is talking about there. So, of course, value stream mapping has been around for ages and been an absolute stalwart in Lean for a long time, following from Rother and Schuch's book in the late 1990s. But digital, and in particular Internet of Things, has brought new dimension to mapping. I must admit that I was introduced to this by various students. This is an old theme of me. I learn more from the students than they learn from me. This is so I got into this via some very good student projects. But anyway, so by now, process mining is very digital mapping and process mining is very well established particularly in some larger companies, and there are a whole range today of major consultancies around in this area. So in a sense, this is old hat to some people, but also brand new to others. So, I think maybe just to mention this, one of the, if you like, the big guru on this is a guy, Wim van der Alst, and he's produced a lot of stuff that you can pick up on on YouTube and so on. But anyway, what is this all about? In fact, a traditional value stream map, you normally would follow the normal sequence, the standard sequence. And of course, this is fine for a lot of manufacturing. So because there's really only one route, or pretty well not much variation in routes that are being followed. But actually, of course, in service and hospitals and administration and things like insurance and so on, the number of routes that can go through a particular process is vast, can run to really hundreds of variations. So if you wanted to track all these manually, you just couldn't do this. But of course, now you can begin to hook in with, link this up with various computer systems that Matthias is talking about there. And essentially, a lot of the mapping can be aided very significantly by these methods. So, and of course, this also enables you to do all sorts of other things. But I should just hasten to add here that I'm by no means running down the sort of traditional go-to-Gemba kind of mapping. I mean, I think that's still very, very valuable to get your backside onto the shop floor, if you like, and follow that thing. But to look at all the number of variations, reworks, deviations that can take place, I think this is a very valuable sort of tool. So So process mining enables you to do quite a lot of things. So according to Van Alst, it enables process discovery, conformance checking, performance analysis, and a big deal here is simulation. So, and also the idea of the digital twin, predictive analysis is something that you couldn't normally do with traditional value stream mapping. And of course, this would also be quite useful for whole change management story. So, as we say, this is an area that is well established in some organizations, but is brand new in others. And well, I think that it's inevitable as digital progresses that we'll see more and more of this, and enabling the power of process mining and data analysis to take place. So something to look out for. Finally, human aspects. We've already spoken about human aspects, just seeing the book Human Lean. But we do have some material in the book on human aspects. So for example, psychological safety, I think, is something that's risen very strongly over the last number of years. But anyway, I think that, of course, in general, the Lean Toolbox is about explicit knowledge. So, the title of the Lean Toolbox is of course, an explicit book on how to do various things, or at least give an introduction on how to do various things. But I don't think any book really covers tacit knowledge adequately. So, I think that in that sense, the Lean Toolbox is not the final answer. You still need to do a whole lot of familiarization with hands-on kind of work. So, and the old Gemba approach and so on, building up your tacit knowledge is something that is always out there. Okay, so those are a few of the areas. As you say, there's been many of the sections have had minor and sometimes fairly major updates, but anyway, those are some of the things we've just picked out. Okay, so all right.
Okay, John. Thanks for that. Finish off just. Yeah, that was your last point, I think. Yeah.
That's saying that kind of regarding these as a set, that we couldn't get all the human stuff. Well, it couldn't get all the human stuff into human lean. Never mind. But anyway, so this is the way we're thinking these days. Okay.
Okay, great. Okay, well, let's move on to the second interactive part of the session, the polls. You will know we're going to use Mentimeter to generate this interaction and hopefully some insights. We've got some prepared questions. Most of you have probably used Mentimeter before. We've used it a few times in these sorts of sessions. A few things just to remind you: you can make snap comments on poll results in which they display for a few seconds in the presentation. So there's a lot of instant things. If you've got a more considered comment or pose a question, use the Zoom chat facility. We may be able to address those later, or certainly communicate comments or thoughts. In the instructions, we would have talked about using the integrated app with the Zoom desktop, which for the best experience. But if you haven't been able to do that, then you can use a code, which I'll show shortly. So that's what we're going to move on to now. I'll be closing this presentation down in a second and launching Mentimeter. When I do that, essentially you get an invite to the Mentimeter poll. And for those who've got the app, you just click view, and the app for Zoom will open in a new window, and off you go. I'll then share the actual presentation, and then we'll be able to vote inside the Zoom meeting. So it's a fairly simple process. If you don't have the app, then you do have the option to actually click add and then go through a short authorizing process with Zoom and then get it installed, and then you can actually use it. So it is possible to quickly do that and get back in. A tip there: don't be in full screen mode because you won't see the voting panel. And for those who just can't get the app, then you can participate via the Mentimeter website, menti.com, and this code will be on is essentially what you use. So that if you have to use it on a separate machine, phone, or whatever, that's just it. That's just in case. Okay, so those are the instructions. Hopefully, you're all familiar with this. I'm going to stop sharing this at this stage, and now I'm going to launch the hopefully the Mentimeter app. Involves a few clicks. I shall now invite all participants to. You should be getting something over your machines as I speak. And then I shall share the screen. So hopefully you can all now see the first Mentimeter screen, which says has polls on it. And again, this is just some instructions. As I said, most of the questions that we've put forward obviously are based on the content of the book, which is pretty massive, obviously, but we've sort of used the theme of lean evolution, trends and challenges that the whole range of editions have covered, and those are the main topics that we've set questions on, and the idea is that once we've voted, we'll get some commentary in from John and Matthias. Again, you can make those snap comments that come up straight away, even send an emoji, or make more considered comments via the Zoom chat. As I said, if we don't, if we've got time at the end, we can obviously have some more questions. So I'll be sort of controlling the slides in theory, and moving on. We can pause, we can go back, we can have timers and all this sort of stuff. We've got an icebreaker question, just so you get used to using Mentimeter, and that question is approximately how many copies of the Lean Toolbox have been sold since its first edition in around 1998. So you start entering your guesses or your estimations now. So we'll wait a while. Wow, it's a pretty big spread there. What I can do is we can have a countdown for the I'll give you this is a 10-second countdown. So after 10 seconds, the poll will close. Okay, so well done everybody for managing to that. And if I press the button now, you should see the actual number. Any comment on that, John?
Yes, well, actually, it's quite a difficult thing to work out because of the various translations and editions and so on. So, you know, there's been various translations that have taken place, so quite difficult to keep track of all these things. But actually, towards the end of last week, I got an email from our Chinese guy who told me that that the Chinese version of the fourth edition, which is the one they translated, Chinese version of the fourth edition, had sold 34,000 copies in China. Now, that sounds good, but I mean, the bad news from my point of view is that the guy who did the translation gets nearly all the money. So good news and bad news about that. But so anyway, there we go.
Okay, great. Well, there we go. So hopefully you're used to the Mentimeter operation. Let's move on to the next question. Now, this is a type it in type answer. And I want you to name one topic that is critical now that was not relevant when the first edition was published in 1998. Obviously, you covered a bit of that as part of the intro to the sixth edition, but think of a topic and explain it in a few words, and then start clicking them in.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yep, that's right.
I think we can close that now. I mean, you scroll up and down, you see quite a few of the comments there. John, any surprises there?
Well, a lot of people have correctly identified digital as being a big thing. So, of course, I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the first edition, but in fact, I had to look some of this up. But in fact, if you look going back to the first edition, some of the things that were ignored, certainly there was no mention of digital whatsoever, and things like RPA and, well, social media, wow. But some things that were pretty well downplayed in the early edition was, well, not much mention of supply chain, actually. Also, things about that were absent in the first edition were things like mention of kata, which I think is a very sort of important aspect. And of course, an old favorite of mine, or a new favorite of mine, newish favorite, is TWI. So TWI actually only emerged in about the third edition, something like that. So yeah. And of course, yeah, absolutely. Green, lean and green, a big one that had no mention in the early editions.
John, maybe a few words. I mean, digital, obviously, we also identify it as being key. I just think it's useful to maybe say where this Industry 4.0 term actually comes from. It was in 2011 that it was a proposal to the German government how Germany's manufacturing sector could remain competitive. And the argument was to say, look, if you want to remain competitive, you will need to create what they call cyber-physical systems in order to then be able to use all these technologies. And I think that's something that when we talk about digital often is forgotten, is that if you want to really make use of digital, as in, use AI or, use a digital twin or, IoT, you need to enable that connection between the physical process and the digital world. Only then will you generate the data to use, for example, tools like AI to their full potential. And of course, RPA has been mentioned here. That could be very happily be coupled with AI, for example, to what's then called intelligent process automation. But essentially, all this bears great potential. But the big assumption is that you create that cyber-physical connection first in order to create that data and that ability to sense what's happening in the physical world, to make sense of it. And then if you want to even digitally change something in the form of, for example, a robotic process automation application. So I think it's great, but digital in many ways is a term like chocolate, right? It means many things to many people, and one should be quite specific what needs to happen first for you to be able to use a lot of the tools that we consider here are valuable. And that's quite an investment as well in many settings, right? One of which could be investing in process mining, for example.
Okay, great. That's predictable, I think, in terms of the responses, but I think just emphasizes its criticality. Okay, next question. We've got some answers. This, not sure where they've come from. Let's just reset the results on that slide. So we want you to answer the question, which is the most important leadership ability currently needed lead? So this is this is what we're looking at today now. We've got the results sort of appearing in real time here. You can see how the room is moving. But the idea is you don't look to see what they're doing, you base on what you think.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, we'll close this in a second or so. Okay, so a fairly convincing popular choice here, the ability to mentor and guide management and staff, with the ability to create a climate of psychological safety coming after that, and a small number ability to embrace the new diversity challenge, and no one thinking the ability to deploy artificial intelligence with machine learning. A bit more specific. But John and Matthias, comment on that result.
Yeah.
Right, I'll start. So the most common question I get, I also run the Oxford Artificial Intelligence Program, which is an outreach program where we train managers in AI and machine learning. And the most common question I get is, do I need to learn to code to understand AI? And my response is always, no, if you are thinking about deploying and supervising AI in your organization, you don't need to learn to code. You don't need to be able to deploy it, but you need to be able to be a competent customer. Meaning, if you think of the analogy of a taxi driver, right? Taxi drivers don't understand, for the most part, how an electronic fuel injection system works, but they do know very well whether they want a petrol or a diesel or a carburetor, or, well, not that you can buy them anymore, but or a hybrid or a fuel injection engine or an electric vehicle. So, you need to become a competent customer, meaning you need to understand what your technological choices mean for your organization, even though you may not be fully in the weeds of what's the actual technical details. Essentially, you need to be able to judge good from bad, and therefore make the right decisions for your organization. So I think seeing 0% here is also the right answer if there's one, meaning that understand enough to make good decisions for your organization, but there's no need to go beyond that. By the way, I also voted for blue here, but John, I'll leave you to comment.
Okay, well, I would pretty well agree with this. I think that the ability to mentor and guide, I think, is crucial. Of course, at higher levels, there's the ability to set the strategic direction, of course. So, I think the leadership takes place on many levels, and probably throughout those levels, but perhaps more importantly, as one moves down the organization, so to speak, the ability to mentor and guide becomes more important. And so this goes back to the old Kaizen flag. Do you remember the Kaizen flag of Masaki Imai's little picture? I think that's a useful reference to think about this picture. But also psychological safety. This is something that's arisen over the last number of years. Pretty well, the big champion of this is a lady from Harvard Business School. Edmondson. She's really jacked up the awareness of psychological safety. Certainly, this is crucial for Kaizen, continuous improvement idea. The idea that if people are in any way frightened or scared to put forward ideas, your whole Kaizen thing is just not going to work. Actually, of course, this also fits in very well with the whole idea of Agile, of course, where you want participation at various levels. It's interesting, so that a few people talked about the ability to embrace new diversity challenges. And, everything about diversity, we're not only talking about sort of gender diversity or racial or ethnic diversity, but also skill diversity. I think quite a lot of discussion more recently on the necessity for skilled skill diversity. So, obviously, if you're only focusing on on your, say, engineers, you're going to come up with an engineer solution. So, and so on. So, to widen that out becomes more and more important, particularly, of course, at the design stage and on the new product stage. But overall, I think I go along with this. I think, yeah. Good.
Okay, John, great. Let's move on to the next question. It's a simple yes, no. Is Agile becoming more relevant than Lean? What's your views on that one?
Yes, okay. Yeah. Pretty definite there.
So maybe an anecdote here as we're closing. We sent a paper to Harvard Business Review on Lean, and the answer we got back, well, if we could maybe make it a bit broad and include Agile, because after all, that was the talk of the town. And i.e. no one was interested in a Lean paper at this point. That's a few years back, but I think it sort of provides the an indication of the sentiment that Agile has covered a lot of, a lot of senior management's attention. And there's a big feeling that, oh, well, we ought to be Agile. To my students, I always say, look, Agile is great, but it's a development, it improves development processes. And then unless you are in the development worlds, you can't run your factory in the same way in an Agile fashion and turn every car that you send down the line into a sprint, right? It just doesn't work. So I've come across in my consulting work a lot of bad Agile implementations where people try and apply this to non-development processes or repetitive processes, and then you end up in some funny scenarios where they have 12-week-long sprints, and each sprint then becomes a waterfall in its own right, and they just use the term just to satisfy those that think it ought to be done without really understanding what it is. So I think it's great, but it's great for a very specific thing, which is the new king's clothes, that's for sure. Agile works really well if you accept that there's emergence, you don't know what you're developing, that you are able to gather rapid feedback from your customers, and that you're able to chunk the product or whatever you're developing into meaningful chunks that you can review, right? Only under those three conditions, Agile makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, you've got the wrong tool.
Yeah.
Great.
In the book, we spent a bit of time talking about so-called VUCA. So VUCA standing for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So that's probably one of the main reasons why Agile has taken off as it has, because of those sort of VUCA concepts. So, I think the answer to this here, I would go along with this, but I think it is, as Matthias has talked about here, it is a little bit situation specific, I think. Of course, in a situation where you've got more uncertainty, shorter life cycles, flexibility, lean startup, and so on, a lot of Agile concepts become very useful. So it's Agile becoming more relevant. I think it is. I believe it is becoming more relevant, not necessarily in Lean, but I think some of those ideas, as set out in the Agile Manifesto, are quite valuable from a Lean thinking perspective, I think.
Okay, John, great. Thanks for that. We'll move on. Okay, this is another simple no, not sure, yes. Will TOTA still be the benchmark or standard reference for Lean by 2030? What the views are on that?
Yeah.
Interesting, right? One could have almost asked the question a different way, saying, is Toyota the reference for Lean now? And I guess many that work in non-manufacturing sectors will already say no. I think Toyota, well, in my view, Toyota is the true north of how to define the Lean philosophy. But is it the benchmark? I would say no. Certainly not outside of manufacturing. John, what do you think?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting that the answer to this one, saying that thinking that no and not sure, I think is quite significant. That would probably have been a big change in attitudes if we'd had this question maybe 10 years ago. I think, yeah, but I don't know how many of you guys watched the Lean Enterprise Institute's sort of online 24-hour conference thing. I don't know, which took place, what was it, about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. Anyway, one of the interesting things that came out was Christoph Rosse, who's a guy that I'm frequently in touch with, or occasionally in touch with, in Germany. Christoph is a guy that has worked at Toyota for quite a number of years before becoming a professor in Germany, but he's recently had a sabbatical in, I think a 1-year sabbatical with Toyota in Japan again. And what he said was that he became quite if you like, perturbed, or anyway, his comment was that, in his opinion, Toyota had become a lot more bureaucratic, a lot more, if you like to use his phrase, Americanized than it had been when he first worked in Toyota. So that's kind of interesting. But anyway, yeah, and of course, as Lean diversifies, so maybe automotive ideas become less relevant, although the underlying Kaizen ideas are still absolutely crucial. And you know, we're going to continue to learn a lot from Toyota, because of course, they don't stand still themselves. So maybe Matthias could say something about Toyota's Chinese partner that apparently is going for much more automation than Toyota in Japan.
Well, it's interesting, fundamental question, right? Automation in the sense of displacing humans, making a process far more standardized, yet also far more rigid, right? And I think what we've seen is certainly if you take Toyota's sort of trajectory over the past 60, 70 years, certainly they've become much more mainstream. So I think Christoph's point about that they've become much more American, I think I would qualify only in the sense to say that Toyota has become much more American, but equally a lot of the Western car manufacturers have adopted a lot of lean ideas. But ultimately, if you go to a car factory now, I see very little difference between a Toyota plant and much of the Western plants. The big differences to me happen in design and how the organization is run, how the supply chain is run. But in terms of automation, I must say I see actually remarkably little difference compared to what it was like when I did my MSc, right? Late 90s, and you went around American car plants, or even then the first Chinese car plants that we got to see, were mostly just manual operations, low volume, and all that's sort of homogenized to such a degree that I find them nearly indistinguishable. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, John. Yeah.
Nicola made a note about benchmark. Did you, Nicola? Can you say something about that one?
Thank you. I was just saying that I felt that this discussion that you're having just now about will Toyota still be the benchmark, the standard in 2030, beg your pardon. It's been really helpful for me to listen to everyone's comments, and I hadn't really considered it before today, and it's really piqued my interest, and I really want to go away and talk about it with my colleagues and understand what their thoughts are about it. It's really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the next question. And this is a state your level of agreement or disagreement with the following statements. Again, the focus on lean change and trends, and again, some of the themes that we've touched. Lean has evolved about as far as it can go. Lean is constantly being reinvented in response to changes. Digital will make lean redundant. Lean leadership is no different from general good leadership, and there's still too much focus on tools and not enough on culture. So slide your slider across and vote on that. Okay. Okay, we'll close that one and have a look at the results there. Obviously, to the left strongly disagree, the right is strongly agree. So basically, not much agreement on lean has evolved as far as it can go. More agreement on lean is constantly changing. Almost no agreement on digital lean will make lean redundant. Slightly less on leadership. Lean is no different from general good leadership, and a lot of agreement on there's too much focus on tools and not on culture. The thoughts on that one, John?
Yeah, again, interesting responses here. So, in fact, the first question Lean has evolved about as far as it can go. If the question had been TPS, I wonder whether we had a slightly different answer, because some of the big, authorities in Lean, like Schonberger and so on, and Robert Hall, and these guys have said that, in fact, TPS was pretty well in place in the late 1990s. But maybe Lean, I think Lean has continued to evolve, but is that the case with Toyota? So Toyota production system. But anyway, at least they were also talking about the tools, I think, which might relate to the last question. Actually, just talking about the last question, there's too much focus on tools, not enough on culture. Actually, I think that there's a bit of a danger on this, is that, in fact, that there's more recently, there's been such a lot of talk on culture and people's side and things that, in fact, some of the tools are being forgotten about. So I'm not sure about that 3.8 in the last question.
Incidentally, just say, John, the shading shows the spread of the votes as well, so that gives a slightly different angle on it.
Oh yes, all right, yes, yeah, okay. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, also lean leadership no different from general good leadership. That's an interesting one. So, actually, a couple of weeks ago, I read a really amazing book. I thought it's by Langley Sharp, called The Habit of Excellence. Now, Langley Sharp is a lieutenant colonel in the British Army, and it's a book on British Army leadership. But so much of it, I thought, as I read through this, I thought, wow, this is just so applicable to a lot of lean, so I think my opinion on that lean leadership one has changed a lot over the last couple of weeks. Wow. By the way, read Langley Sharp's book, The Habit of Excellence. Wow, fantastic.
Okay.
Matthias, did you want to say?
No, I mean, my comment would have been, I actually think lean leadership is no different from general good leadership. And if, I think all lean improvements leads are well advised to just, have the general toolkit of leading and sustaining change, at their disposal, because ultimately process improvement is a focal change, right? So all the sort of those tools that you require to lead and sustain change are required. In that sense, I see little difference maybe from general good leadership, other than I think a lot of good leaders should also learn a lot more about Lean, but that's an obvious point that we don't need to make here.
Oh, well, yes, agreed. Yeah.
Okay, great. Interesting stuff there. Next question. Right, this is you've got to think on this one. You've got 100 points to allocate amongst factors that threaten Lean's effective use. So basically, put a number in each next to each one of those, and then they should add up to 100. So it's underestimating employee attitudes resistant to change, overemphasis on new information and digital technology, insufficient workforce skills to implement Lean, insufficient management time to support Lean, and use of uncoordinated set of tools. So basically, those are threats which against Lean's effective use, and we want you to put a value to each of them. So we'll allow a bit more time for this one because you're going to think it through.
Okay. So yes. Yeah.
Okay, I think we're a few more seconds. Okay, we'll close the void. But then we got a tie, I think. Insufficient management time to support Lean and underestimating employee attitudes through resistance to change. John, thoughts on that one?
Yeah, of course. Well, yeah, I mean, management has obviously got a lot of all sorts of pressures that are not necessarily directly related to Lean. They might be indirectly related to Lean, but especially these days with so much change going on, especially over the last couple of years. Therefore, probably has not been sufficient time to support Lean. So hopefully that will change. But I think this has got a bit to do with that earlier question about diversity, really. So that diversity and trust. So yeah, and that's really the first. So the first two really relate to that sort of thing. So I think that those two would be, I would have put those two at the top of the list as well. Insufficient workforce skills, I think this can be actually developed. So you want to get hire the right people, not necessarily hire the right skills. Anyway.
I mean, to me, it's the most frustrating thing working with companies on the Lean journey has been senior management seeing it as a project, and they do it, they start it, they conclude it, and then they move on. And then, of course, it all fizzles away as detention, veins, and it just becomes something that they have done rather than they are doing. So, yeah, I think the yellow line certainly is also one that I think is clear, right? It's not something you do as a project. It's either you do it or you don't. And I remember one dinner with an ops director, and he said, "Oh yeah, Lean, we have done that." And I thought, okay, I can go home now, right? There's nothing to do for you here. But yeah, anyway, so I think it's a good outcome, and it shows also the complexity of the challenges involved in sustaining lean improvements.
Yeah,
I wonder if we'd asked that question 25 years ago, we would have got the same, probably the same top three, I suspect.
Well, yeah. Also, just a comment about the third one: insufficient workforce skills. There's been a lot of talk recently, for example, in The Economist. I'm a big reader of The Economist magazine, so about the shortages of if you like, workforce skills in manufacturing, particularly in the United States and in many areas of Europe. So this is becoming quite an issue, I think. So it's becoming quite yeah, a lot of competition for workforce skills.
Okay, great. Let's move on. Next question. One on a specific one on Industry 4. So you've just got to choose one as to whether you think Industry 4 is a threat to UK manufacturing, a threat to manufacturing employment, a boost to UK manufacturing, a boost to productivity growth, or you're not sure. So for those of you who've got a view on Industry 4.0. Hey.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Interesting indeed, right? So I voted threat to manufacturing employment in the UK. Mostly on the experience I have is that companies could gain in terms of boosting their productivity, but in effect, I see the UK from the limited, biased sample that I see as generally not ready, right? I think people are aware of what's coming, that it's important, but firms are nowhere near ready to engage with it in a meaningful way to derive productivity growth. So I must say, I think it's a threat to employment more than anything. And I think other countries overall have been better at developing the skills and the infrastructure needed to really make the best use of Industry 4.0.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think the UK really needs to compete at the top end of value adding. So it would be futile to try and do the reverse. So and in that particular area, I'd go along with Matthias there. Particularly also in service sector. I don't know whether this is or in other disciplines. Some of these disciplines are in for quite a shock, like lawyers and so on. I think there's going to be a big shakeout in some of these areas, but this is not manufacturing, of course. But, yeah.
Okay, good. Let's move on. This one's about environmental sustainability. So, how much influence did it have on your operational strategy 5 years ago? This is looking at the past.
$5 years ago.
Yeah, we've got, I think, most responses are in there. I mean, we've obviously got most, majority, very little or no influence. fifth strong influence.
Yeah.
Any comment on that, John?
Well, I must say I'm quite surprised at that, being 5 years ago very strong and quite strong. Certainly, the things have changed over the last number of years. So I'm a bit surprised that there was that degree of influence 5 years ago. If you in the Lean Toolbox 6th edition, talk about, there's a little section we talk about the different kinds, just read them out. Climate change, biodiversity, energy, landfill, air pollution, chemical pollution, ocean degradation, freshwater degradation, ozone layer, deforestation, nitrogen threats. So all of these things, I'm not sure whether they were fully recognized even 5 years ago, but perhaps I'm wrong. Okay.
Well, maybe we could go on to the next question, because that asks, what about now? How much influence does environmental strategy have on operations today? So it's the same, make the same judgment now based on today rather than 5 years ago. So let's see how the figures change.
Yeah. Very strong, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay, so see a different shape to that.
Yeah. So that's more with going along with my expectations. So I think that's been one of the big things that the differences between these areas between the 5th edition and the 6th edition. There was talk in the 5th edition, but now, well, Neil is out there somewhere. So Neil, Neil did good work on Lean is Green, and so this has become a very prominent thing. Is that right, Neil?
Yeah, I mean, our journey with Andrea, started in 2008 when we started doing the first Kaizans. And it took us obviously a while for us to get a PhD, but we published that book in 2016. Yeah, and we were kind of the lone warriors then. But it has, I think, obviously the work I do is kind of a little bit biased towards that. But it's certainly got a lot more focus now. Two things, obviously COP26, but also the energy prices going through the roof. It's all about the profit element of the people, planet, and the profit at the moment. But you take whatever lever you need to do to reduce the environmental impact, really.
Yeah. Okay, great stuff. Thank you.
Okay. We've got some operations and challenges to be ranked in order of importance. So this is a ranking exercise. Letting go fear of failure, shifting the company culture, end-to-end transformation, making improvements stick, and willingness to enhance new technology. So we want a ranking of each of those, please. So start ranking.
Oh. Oh. Yeah.
So we've got shifting the company culture as the first, making improvements, 6, sustainability, second.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's sort of a sort of predictable result, really, about shifting the company culture. I think a problem here, the word culture is such a sort of amorphous term that it's. So I agree with this, but it's a difficult thing to pin down. Whereas what I would put down for this one is letting go of fear, letting go of the fear of failure. You know, there's one of the things we did talk about in the book is drawing on Stanley McChrystal. Stanley McChrystal was the Supreme Allied Commander in Afghanistan, and he tells an interesting story in his book Team of Teams, where he's saying that, you know, the Americans and the Allies had all the technology, all the, but they were nevertheless being given a real runaround by the Taliban. And why was that? It was because of the decentralized nature of the command structure, so that the Allies had to have a big reporting structure right the way up through the various chains, which meant that they were just not agile enough, to use a phrase, to respond. So, in fact, McChrystal really had to change things all around, and I think that that's a lesson that applies not only to the military. I think it's quite a universal thing. So it's letting go of the fear of failure. You've got to. It's to do with trust, you know, which is a big Lean thing, I think. Anyway, I don't know. From Sarah, okay. There are many interdependencies. Yeah, you're right, Sarah. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. I'll move on to the next question. We're coming to the end now, so we've got a conclusion question. I want everyone to write 3 words that you would describe. You describe the Lean Toolbox, whether that's current edition or even previous ones you're familiar with. So this will turn up as a word cloud. So,
I hope there's nothing rude here, but anyway.
I've got moderator mode off, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah. Well, okay.
Well, that's great to see. Of course, that's what we're hoping it would be. And if you pick, you know, a comprehensive and, go-to guide, library of tools, reference, all this together, that also brings about the greatest challenge, because we could easily do a book that is twice the size, right? I mean, adding is always the easy bit. Then deciding what not to put in is almost, that we probably have the most debates on what shouldn't be in there, or if something ought to be shortened. So that's, I guess, and I don't know how many times we've met for the 6th edition, but every single time we did meet, probably, I don't know, good handful of times, it was all about, well, what should go. Yeah, or what needs to be in there.
Yes, correct. Yeah, well said, Matthias. Okay, well, thank you for those. I think, wow.
Good stuff. Okay, well, I mean, we've just about reached the end now. if we'd had a lot more time, we could have asked a question, but I don't think we'll just spend too much time doing this. But if you've got any other questions, you can obviously add them to the chat. I think we've got